he was motivated to take on a CEO role, and he was asked not by one but by others. He was one of, I'm sure one of the most recruited guys out there for our business categories. And interestingly, he left the apparel business and went to the music business. He is now the CEO of Gibson brands. Any of you who grew up playing guitar like I did, you clearly know the Gibson brand. But he went there with a lot of persuasion because the brand, the company, frankly, was in trouble. But it had a great history behind it. I'm going to let JC tell you the story in a short time, what he's done and what his thoughts are about the future. JC.
Yeah. All right, let's get this one, let's just get this on the table. Who here plays guitar? All right, that's about 6%, not enough. All right, and you genuinely have to go right to your soul and your energy when you were a kid, when you're a teenager, even now. Who really wants to learn to play guitar? Okay, now we're getting into 80% club. Okay, good, that's better. So that's quite frankly one of the challenges we have. But I think before you get into and it was interesting to hear the different motivations and what's been going on, but what I want to do is share with you a story that's a little bit personal, a little bit about how I got here, some of my journey, but less about my journey, more about the journey of some of the brands I've been with and the teams I've been part of to actually help craft and shape everything from a vision. And how do you take that vision and turn it into something you can actually look back on and say, wow, the vision was a reality, right? And that's not often the case. Vision is sometimes seen as something you never actually achieve. But in today's world, with timing dynamics, with information, with acceleration, you can actually set a vision and put specific actions in place and see if you're tracking to that. And what I want to share with you is how to turn some of those moments into momentum. So we got the guitars out of the way, but who here, where are the students back there? Who's a student here? All right, students back there. Do you take a course called Momentum? Is there a course offered called the Momentum course? Why not? I mean, the fundamental essence of learning, of coming to a company, of joining a brand is to help them create momentum. So go back to your professors and say, we demand a course called Momentum. How's that? For the rest of you, who here has the word momentum in their job description? Oh, okay. So you guys might be ahead of the game, students. If you get that course in, then demand it in your job description, then you can say, I'm the chief momentum officer of my company. How cool would that job be? You could be the first chief momentum officer. But if you think about it, momentum is actually the goal. It's actually what we're all trying to achieve. Is it right? Personally, professionally, a little bit of momentum. So let me take you back to physics. You didn't think you were going to get a physics lessons, did you? Let's get this going again. And so if you think about physics and how it can apply to a brand and to a business, you go back a few hundred years. No one thinks Newton was a business person, right? But he actually knew more about business than we think and than he thought. The first law of motion says an object at rest tends to stay at rest until you apply force. Remember that one in about grade 7, grade 8? Remember that one? Careful, it's going to get trickier in a second. An object at rest tends to stay at rest until you apply force. Basically what it says is, if you do nothing, nothing happens. If you do nothing for your brand, nothing for your business, nothing might happen. That's the easy one. The second law of motion says force equals mass times acceleration. It basically says how big you are and how fast you go will determine the type of force you can apply. And what we heard today and what you've heard often in the last few years are brands that are getting big fast, and they're applying that force in different ways than they might have intended. Some of it very positive, some of it challenging, some of it we're questioning, but at the same time, that force equals mass times acceleration, getting bigger and going faster is also a definition of momentum. But then comes the third law of motion. I'll start it, you finish it. For every action, there's an equal and opposite. And we're hearing about that more than ever today. Reactions. Think of it as competition. The minute someone thinks they figured something out, someone else is already working on something better, faster, cheaper, an alternative. You're seeing it every day. That's called competition. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. We need to take those three laws of motion into consideration when we start thinking about our brands and our business. Physics class over, and you all passed, all right? So I arrive at Gibson. I don't know if you know Gibson or Gibson guitars. I'm going to tell you the story about them, but I was at Levi's for many years, had an unbelievable, I wouldn't even call it a career, it was just an amazing experience, a professional experience, a personal experience for me. I wore Levi's all my life. I was part of a team that was able to take what was at one stage, I think I can say this now, a commoditized denim brand, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we turned it into today a global leading lifestyle brand. And all of a sudden, this opportunity came up to take on a new challenge. And I took it on. And I knowingly took it on at a time of significant distress for a company. There's a terrible word in our vernacular called bankruptcy. On May 1st, 2018, Gibson declared bankruptcy. I was still at Levi's. And I remember seeing this, and as a musician, as a lover of music, as an owner of guitars, I said, how can that happen? How can an iconic brand that all the coolest rock stars and musicians love and know and own and collect and covet and display and play, how can that happen? I thought to myself, I gotta understand this and maybe I can help. We've got a pretty decent playbook at Levi's, an iconic American brand that quite frankly took its leadership for granted, but then returned itself through a center point of authenticity. I just wanted to call someone. I didn't know who to call. Orville Gibson, who invented it, like Levi Strauss invented the jeans, isn't around anymore. Well, all of a sudden I get a call. JC, would you be interested in talking to Gibson? I said, what? Wait a second. Aren't they, bankrupt? And here's me thinking I'm going to help them, but then I'm worried, right? And all of a sudden, through a series of conversations, I understood that my destiny as a musician, as a guy who could kind of connect some brands and hopefully bring a vision, was going to materialize, and it was super exciting. I felt like my role at Levi's had come to an amazing conclusion, and it's gone off to do, as Terry said, they've done amazing things recently. I couldn't be more proud of that. But I took on this challenge, and the challenge was SOS, and it's a very real distress signal for a company and for a brand when you go bankrupt, SOS. And I thought to myself, that's the SOS at Gibson. How do we save our sound? The sound that a Gibson makes is coveted, it's known. On November 1st, Gibson emerges from bankruptcy. On November 1st, it was announced I was the new CEO. The week prior, I did a town hall to everyone in the company around the USA, in our factories, in our headquarters in Nashville. I wanted to get 1 week ahead of it so that they didn't hear it from the news who the new CEO was. I introduced myself, and I walked out with a simple piece of cardboard saying, SOS, save our sound. A week later, as the new CEO, I said, wow, how are we going to save this sound? And I started thinking, and the more I learned about it, I thought, what can I bring to Gibson? Have you ever done that on day one of something? Go, wow, what can I really bring here? And I'm going to, by the way, if you don't know, I'm taking you on a kind of a crazy journey here, from physics to Gibson guitars to Levi's. Now we're going to go somewhere different. Who here has done genetic testing, 23andMe? All right, pretty cool, right? Pretty cool concept. You learn about your background and where you might have come from and what, I think it's kind of cool. But then I thought, like, how easy would it be to just do your own, like, photographic testing? And someone once asked me, JC, how do you kind of like, sometimes you're like really direct and specific and you're not afraid to take charge, and other times you're just like this free spirit, and sometimes, you know, you're this pioneer guy. I'm like, well, I know why, because this is my grandfather. He was a Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Yeah, a Mountie. But he was a pioneer. He left London at the age of 15 as an orphan, saw a sign, joined the New World. He got on a ship and he joined the Northwestern Mounted Police. And by definition, anyone who's 15 gets on a boat and goes halfway around the world. To become a Mountie is a pioneer. I'm like, there's my 23andMe starting point. Then add the dimension of this badass, Commander Curleigh, on the USS Intrepid in 1965, 2 weeks before I was born. He was asked to come and join the US Navy for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And about 2 years after that, he was asked by the US Navy to join them to pick up astronauts. Just look at that guy. Not afraid to take the lead, get in a helicopter, protect what's needed, and pick up some cool people along the way, and astronauts. Oh, and then you say, well, hold on, JC, neither of those guys are you. You got too long a hair and you're too rock and roll to be a Mountie or a general. Enter my mom, Nancy. Awesome. Rocking her Levi's in 1969. Between her and Joan Baez, I'm not sure I could tell the difference. Playing her Epiphone guitar, which is owned by Gibson. How cool is that shot? So that's me. And then you go, well, okay, I got that. What else about genetic dynamics do you need to know? Watch this one. A real picture. I got an identical twin brother. So when anything goes sideways, I'm like, that wasn't me. That wasn't there. Are you kidding me? But what I do have is an individual that I can trust who can challenge me. And throughout your lives and careers, we've all had performance reviews and we've had dynamics, we've had courageous conversations. I've got an individual that I can do that with literally on a daily basis. Find that person in your life. And then those 3 passports represent the fact I'm a triple citizen of the USA, born in Norfolk, Virginia when my dad was on secondment from the Canadian Navy. I spent a lot of time in Europe in my life, UK passport, and I'm also Canadian. And I put that up there not to say, isn't that cool? And when you look like me, you need to have options. What I put that up there for is to say this notion of cultural diversity that's really in the zeitgeist of our culture today. I grew up in that. I went to 13 different schools. I've lived in 5 different countries. I've understood that if you don't know how to culturally engage, you kind of don't exist. Then finally, the one that confuses people the most is I take what I do really, really serious. As a CEO of a company, as the president of the Levi's brand, I take my role really serious. But I don't take myself too serious. This was Coachella last year. That's my awesome wife, Jackie, of 25 years. And we're not afraid to have a little bit of fun. So that's my 23andMe, all right? And I would encourage you to go back to some of what made you you and reflect on how it can make you you going forward. Now we get into the what and how. What have I done? How have I done it? Just a quick journey. And my first job was when you don't know what you want to do, you say, what's my favorite product on earth? And I want to work there. M&M's. So my first, besides picking blueberries and teaching skiing and all that stuff, was working at M&M Mars in London, in the UK. And I remember very distinctly, I phoned up the UK, I phoned up the head of P&O, Personnel and Organization. I said, I just moved here, just thinking, you know, if there's anything going on work-wise, I just got here, and you know that. And he says, Mr. Curleigh, you're no longer a suspect, you're a prospect. Why don't you come and see us? I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I go in there, I get on this journey with Mars. It was an unbelievable journey. I got in their accelerated development program, and some of you students should understand what those companies can do for you when you get in. They give you different dimensions of learning and experience. It's not always easy for you, but when you get through it, you actually get an opportunity to present some things to some pretty fancy folks in the company, and if they like your idea, they just might do it. Terry, you've had that before, where some of the best ideas come from those individuals that were always trying to find different solutions, and when they get a shot at talking to you and presenting your idea, all of a sudden, it just might work. And a few years later, that idea goes into action, or a few months, or a few days. So I had this idea that Snickers was different names all over the world, and why not name it one thing once? And it was way too complicated. What would be the right time to change the name of a candy bar? And by the way, in the spirit of my British accent, and my friend Elizabeth Wood is here, so she allows me to go to my British accent. You know, I said, well, we got to call it Snickers around the world. And in the UK, in the early 90s, it was called the Marathon Bar. The Marathon Bar. So I'm like, we got to go Snickers global. We're going global branding. My British friend said, JC, Snickers sounds like Knickers, and we ain't doing it. And I'm like, oh, that idea is out the window. So anyway, we did. We presented it to the Mars brothers, said we're going to convert Snickers around the world, and we think we got an idea. Single global event, high impact media, high impact in terms of bringing the world together, the Olympics. And in 1992, convinced the Mars family to sponsor the Olympics, spend $30 million to turn the name Snickers into a global brand. It was the last year that they did in 1992, the summer and winter together, so we knew we had a moment we could capture the essence of the world, the youth of the world, and not just the candy bar of the world. We got to the Olympics and they were doing the paperwork and they said, okay, $30 million, you're going to be the official candy bar. I said, stop. We're going to be the official snack food of the Olympics. Just think about that moment. Candy bar versus snack bar. Think about Snickers as the original energy bar. And it positions it in a way that you could be proud to take it into a domain in moderation, like all things in life. And Snickers went on to be $1 billion brand after that moment. But the vision was critical. I then went on at the Olympics. I met these guys at Salomon, really, really cool. All of a sudden, I'm there, and Georges Salomon, now I'm going French accent on you. Georges Salomon, the founder of Ski Bindings and Ski Boots, says, Jesse, should we be the ski company only, or could we be more? I'm like, George, there's always more. And painted a little thing of a mountain and said, where could the mountain be, George, in 10 years? I said, why don't we look at not just the share of ski, let's look at the share of the mountain. Salomon went on to do, and I was there for 12 years, we went on to launch into snowboarding successfully, into trail running. We even started doing surfing. We took the mountains to the city. Remember the good old days of inline skating? Yeah, we were in that too, right? And just positioning it from share of ski to share of mountain, the vision shift took us on a journey that no one ever would have believed. That shoe right there, ugliest shoe known to mankind. Keen footwear. The most polarizing shoe. You either love them or you hate them. No one kind of likes their Keens. I was the president and CEO of Keen for 5 years. Awesome. From a small startup to a $300 million successful toe-protected hybrid shoe. And what was interesting was anyone wouldn't say, well, what I'm looking for is a sandal that can breathe and protect my toes in the moments that need it, but then have this breathability and have this durability dynamic to it, and that's what I'm looking for. So when people say, like the customer knows what they want, they don't. But when you give them what they didn't know they needed and they fall in love with it, all of a sudden you're building a brand. And when I remember someone said, so what do you call this Protecto Breatho? I said, we call it a hybrid sandal. And it's for people who want to live a hybrid life, who choose to create and to play and to care. And we built a brand on this notion of hybrid, a word that's in the zeitgeist today, but you don't have to overdefine it. If I said to you, who here wants to live a hybrid life? You don't even have to define what it is. You probably say, yeah, it sounds, I think I'm in. Good, you're all hybrid lifers. Then this amazing opportunity at Levi's. And I can remember the first time I stood up on the stage at Levi Strauss & Company. Just an amazing experience for me. And I was going, what can I bring to Levi's? I mean, and I walked in, I remember people going, well, JC, it's not that hard. We invented the blue jean. I'm like, okay, maybe there's a little more we can do. And then I remember people saying, okay, well, we'll just have to fix this. And I said, well, maybe we just need a starting point for a vision that's different. And to be clear, there was a good blueprint being created. Chip Berg, the CEO, came in. I think I was his first hire, and he brought me in, and we decided we were going to do more than just a blueprint. We're going to put a quest together to say, let's not go after share of jeans. Let's go after the share of a closet. Because if you think about it, For every pair of jeans someone has, they own 10 t-shirts, 5 jackets, belts, shoes, socks, underwear. And we pivoted from share of denim to share of closet, and today, all of those are realities, those accessories, those t-shirts, those trucker jackets. They're growing faster than jeans, and jeans are growing again, and that's how you get to lifestyle leadership. So the lesson learned here is a starting point with vision driven by insights and information, a bit of audacity, can actually set the stage for a long time if the vision is aligned with the actions that follow it. So I'm going to take you quickly through a situation. Here's Gibson. What's our story? What's the Gibson story? By the way, every song you hear is played on a Gibson. Mandolins, banjos, 1894, Orville Gibson invents this thing, a mandolin. Then he transitions to banjos when they were in fashion, then acoustic guitars. All of a sudden, the electric guitar era, the golden era comes in. That intersection of a guy named Chuck Berry, the E350T Gibson, right? He was the stance of rock and roll, and he set the stage for rock and roll. And all of a sudden, this music dynamic starts getting created. And Gibson was synonymous with shaping and defining and creating and, quite frankly, owning the share of sound for a long time. Have you ever thought about sound in terms of market share? I didn't until I joined Gibson. And I started thinking, who owns sound? The share of sound as a musical instrument. I thought, and I asked people at Gibson, who's created more sound over time than any other brand? And they're like, I don't know, we never asked that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's us. And then I started looking at it, and you start thinking about the musicians and the genres and the generations and the concerts and the records and the digital music you listen to. We came to the conclusion, both through analytics and data and through intuition, that Gibson has owned more share of sound as a music instrument brand than any other brand. And we're actually looking to see if it owns more than all the other brands combined. That is powerful. And when you have that at your disposal, you have over 125 years of creating and shaping and owning sound. It puts you in a position to have confidence to think about owning the share of sound for the future. So instead of walking in day one and say, how can we sell more guitars? I asked, how can we actually set the conditions for success to start to own the share of sound? I spoke to Dave Grohl, few Foo Fighters. I said, Dave, how many concerts have you done? Dude, thousands. How many people have listened to your music? Millions. Pause. Try billions. Live performances around the world have never been more in demand, and more Gibson guitars are being played on more stages than ever before. And all of a sudden, you're arriving at this vision that says, let's go there. So instead of SOS being Save Our Sound, I've declared it Share of Sound. And you can measure this, folks. When you go to Coachella and I stand there in front of the stage, I can count the number of Gibson guitars versus anyone else. I can go into studios and understand what our artists are playing to create sound that then gets amplified, accelerated, and brought to you digitally. We can also measure when you go into a store and the number of guitars that are there. And this one dynamic that we launched, by the way, folks, let me give you real time, 5 months ago, Share of Sound. It's now captivated our organization, and people come up and say, JC, I've got a share of sound idea. It's not just about the guitar. What else creates it? An amplifier, a pick, a strap, accessories. And all of a sudden, we start connecting our ideas to product categories to start thinking about the share of sound. And then we have this mentality of let's be a startup. We come out of bankruptcy, we've got this thing called a clean balance sheet. If you students are in finance, you'll know what that is. If you don't, go talk to someone in finance. It's quite important. A clean balance sheet. But we have so we got this startup mentality, and if we can have this positive collision of where a startup can collide with 125 years of iconic heritage, share of sound, creation, and ownership, those are pretty good ingredients for success. So that's what I did. And I can tell you, my experience at the startup Keen Footwear and the amazing iconic brand Levi's, remember Goldilocks? I'm right in the sweet spot of the startup and the iconic brand. And I'm going to apply everything I've learned into that, and we already have. So I'm going to take you on a journey really quickly about what you can do. And by the way, I'm not saying this, I'm saying this with you. A lot of you are doing this already. This is the way that I'm thinking about this and our team's thinking about it. When I get there, everyone's saying, hey, you got to just focus on the core guitars. You got to be patient. You got to make sure you're more accessible. You got to increase the capacity in the factories. You got to listen to the guitar players. You got to collaborate with more artists. You got to be in more control. You got to drive authenticity. You got to be culturally relevant. You got to be more aggressive. Anyone seen all these words somewhere? You all have somewhere. But it looks like a hot mess when you present it that way, right? But if you present it in a way that you and your team can divide and conquer against some of these dynamics, you'll find very quickly you can align this against the vision. What if those became this? What if you started to line them up with your team and gave expectations for yourself, the team, and your partners that this is what you're going to focus on? Not all brands and not all businesses need all these words. Choose your own, what mode you're in, we heard earlier today, and I think that's really important. But let's just go quickly through what this means for us, Gibson, and for me. Listen and lead. We stopped listening to guitar aficionados, and we started doing things they never needed, they never wanted, they didn't even like. We started getting novelty with our guitars. And when you're an iconic brand and you go novelty, chances are people stop liking you. And they demand what? Go back to the classic, the original. We learned that at Levi's. So we listened and said, no more novelty, and we weren't even true to our historic past because you couldn't get a 50, 60, 70 spec guitar anymore. So we were caught in the middle ground of our classics weren't classics and our innovative products were novelty. That's a very mediocre place to be. So very quickly, literally, day 3, we said we're going to go back to making classics true to spec, and we're going to strip off the novelty and put only solutions, the features and benefits that the modern guitarist wants, and we know what those are because we listened and we decided to take the lead. 4 months later, we showed up at the biggest, largest industry trade show called NAMM, and we launched our new collection of originals and modern collection, and everyone clapped and said, Gibson's back. 4 months. That's what a startup would do. And it's real, folks. And I sometimes, when I was there, I was like, oh my God, I think they like us. But what it also shows you is the power of a brand. If you're a great brand, all it takes is just a little shift of that perception through real actions. And people, it was like Levi's. Everyone loved Levi's. They just didn't like what was happening to it. Everyone loves Gibson. They didn't like what was happening to it. When you brought and you listened and you took the lead, good things happen. Core and more. This is straight out, and I'm straight out of the Levi's playbook. In fact, Chip Berg penciled this on the blueprint day 1 when he joined and said, we're going to protect our profitable core and we're going to expand for more. And I told Chip, I might use this one, Chip. I think I give him a guitar as royalty. But this is what we did. And what we have to do is protect our core, which is making amazing guitars. And it's amazing once you focus on the core, the team gets energized, the industry gets energized, that, man, you're going back to what you did best. And let me just remind you, if for most of you that didn't hear, the reason why Gibson went bankruptcy had nothing to do, really, with their guitars. They took on way too much. They had a vision, which was not wrong. The vision was, let's be a lifestyle brand, right? And the definition of lifestyle, according to previous leadership, was let's buy commoditized electronics companies from the 1988 to 1992 era that were irrelevant and not in demand, but would require significant investment and innovation to put them back in demand. $500 million of debt, 5 years later, it crushed the company. So through bankruptcy, all of that gets jettisoned. We're left with the core of what we have. Gibson, the most authentic, aspirational guitar brand. Epiphone, if you haven't heard of that, it's the most accessible, affordable guitar. If you've never heard of Epiphone, it's an amazing story. Google last Beatles concert at Candlestick, and they're walking off, and they're all holding Epiphones. Wait till I start telling that story. Seriously, like, it's amazing. So we got our core back, and now we can think about expanding for more. This is one I love. This is what I call the modern-day mullet. Remember the mullet haircut? Remember that one? Man, I'm business in the front, party in the back. You remember it, come on. Right? Well, the modern-day mullet is simplicity in the front, sophistication in the back. And if you think of the best brands on earth, that's what they're delivering to you. Right? Think about your daily ritual. Most of you, 83% in the room, have a daily ritual that involves a customized solution within a block of where you live or work. It involves choice beyond belief. It involves teaching you a new language, vente. It gives you change from $6. It knows your name. And that's pretty simple, right? The sophistication that goes into delivering that experience through a white cup of Starbucks coffee is amazing. Typing in a word on Google and in 0.8 seconds finding everything out about it. We're seeing that this notion of being simple, or even the WeChat explanation of just simplicity through an app, but the level of sophistication that goes into that is amazing. But those that get overly sophisticated and not simple tend not to win. And those that are too simple today without a base level of sophistication get challenged. So balancing simplicity, we make guitars. It's wood, it's electronics, it's a cool thing. Our craftsmen and craftswomen make them by hand in the USA. We're just a simple guitar company. But the sophistication we need to put into the modernization of manufacturing, into the quality levels, into the sophistication of how we connect our fan base to our new products. We have to understand all of that. And we've put the conditions for success of being simple in what we do and sophisticated in how we do it. Authentic and agile. Authenticity, I believe, is the most powerful word for a brand today. It's truly what got Levi's back into action. And you don't have to be old to be authentic. I think we've seen examples of authenticity today that are new companies, new brands that are authentically driven by a story to drive a solution. We heard about the importance of the story here. And this notion of authenticity, if it's crafted properly, it can be amazing. But it also shouldn't just stay still, because an authentic object at rest tends to stay at rest until you apply force. And this notion of agility, understanding how to do things quicker and faster and meet different needs. So we're now in a position where guitarists used to have to wait over 1 year in our custom shop. And I'm talking not a guy who's just willing to pay $10,000. I'm talking about artists like Post Malone, Billy Gibbons, from ZZ Top, talking about Alex Lifeson from Rush, really Sheryl Crow. They might have to wait a year to get their coveted guitar from us. I'm like, how does that happen? They can have a hit album and a non-hit album in 1 year. And we didn't even give them a guitar yet. So we are now accelerating our prioritization. We're understanding how to modernize and actually accelerate the notion of the experience to actually put guitars in our artists, famous and not so famous, faster and with the right balance of authenticity. One of the biggest challenges I've had as CEO, on October 28th, I was in a town hall in Memphis, Tennessee, announcing that I was going to be the new leader of Gibson. It's where we make that guitar. Less than 1 month later, I was in Memphis, Tennessee, announcing we were going to be closing the factory. Anyone had to do that? That's where the general needs to come out, and the Mountie. It's not easy. But what we did was we said we were getting kicked out of the building, all right? And we were going to have to recreate this factory somewhere in Memphis. It was going to cost us about $5 million. We said, what if we took that same investment and doubled down on Nashville, invested in modernization? What if we invited our factory workers and our team and our luthiers and our craftsmen from Memphis? They come to Nashville and join the new Gibson, and if not, we're going to train you for something else. And if not, we're going to give you a retention bonus. All of a sudden, we felt better about the situation because it was the right thing to do for our people, but also for our business and for our brands. Less than 5 months later, we've already transitioned that. We're making that guitar in Nashville, Music City, USA, and artists are coming in and saying, it's amazing, we think they're some of the best guitars you're making right now. It's a bold decision and not easy, but you have to be agile. Otherwise, you could be the most authentic brand that people are talking about whatever happened to them. Control and collaborate. What I've learned is that the more in control you are of your brand, the more freedom you have to collaborate. We learned amazing lessons at Levi's. In fact, we did a lot of amazing collaborations with Macy's. And what we learned was the more in control of our brand we got, the more we could take risks and collaborate with others. You heard about wearable technology earlier. I thought that was pretty cool, by the way. We launched a wearable technology product with Google 3 years ago at Levi's. The first ever wearable technology that could figure out how to navigate, how to communicate, how to entertain with a swipe of your arm on a Levi's jacket powered by Google. In fact, I think I rode into the NRF on a bike with that thing last year, didn't I, or 2 years ago? But think about that. That's this notion of being in control of your brand and your business, but then collaborating. So for Gibson, we've already opened it up. So anyone know Chuck Berry? Does anyone know he's been nicknamed by everyone? Every famous artist has a nickname, whether it's the godfather of rock and roll, the godfather of soul, the father of rock and roll. He was at that amazing intersection in the 50s, right? Has anyone seen the Chuck Berry signature tribute guitar ever? I'll give you the answer. No, because there hasn't been one. We met with the Berry family in my first couple of weeks. Charles Berry, his son, Charlie Berry, his grandson. And we showed him what we were doing, and we showed him some of the guitars, and we didn't have an agenda. We were just like, man, it's just cool to know you guys. And Charles said, when are you all gonna do something for my dad? I said, what's something? He says, the guitar. I said, how about now? We just launched the Chuck Berry E350T that he wrote his most famous songs on. We invited Charlie and Charles to show up at the trade show in January. Spontaneously, they got up and played Johnny Be Good on his father's guitar that we made in 3 months. Pretty cool. Because we got ourselves in control, we could start to collaborate, and there's lots more of that to come. This notion of capacity and quality. One thing I learned from the founder of Keen, who is a really interesting guy. Think Doc from Back to the Future. This is being recorded, Rory, you know I love you. And I do love him. He's an amazing individual. He would say, and this is probably the most profound question that I think an entrepreneur can ask themselves, because it's counterintuitive to what some entrepreneurs are trained to do, which is try to understand how to mitigate risk but be bold, right? There's that kind of contradiction. And what he would say is, he's like, what if we're successful? Are we ready? What if this succeeds faster and better? Do we have the capacity? Can we handle the growth? Let's double down on the things that are going to make us matter. And he did it in a way that you believed it, because he would actually start buying more shoes than we ever had orders for. And he's like, we're ready. And I'm like, what do you got? 20,000. I said, on order, done, made, on a boat. And I'm like, what? And all of a sudden, something like that forces you to go, wow, we got to make this thing successful. So this notion of capacity and quality, we've invested more in capacity expansion in the last 5 months than we have in the last 10 years at Gibson. We've increased productivity. These are real numbers. And I can give you by the day how we did this in terms of understanding modern methods. Quality. Anyone ever been in a guitar shop before? So you can imagine, it's like you make real guitars. Well, one of the #1 quality problems we had at Gibson was, understandably, when the customer got it, had dings and dents in a beautiful guitar. Dings and dents. It's a weird word, and dings and dents, right? And we go to the factory and we understand that dings and dents are caused because we touch that guitar and move it around 74 times. 74 chances to get dinged and dented. We then went in and said, what if we could reduce that in half? We sequentially lined up our factory. We did a Kaizen program where it's basically getting all of our team members and our luthiers, that's a fancy word for a guitar maker, to actually say, what could we do better to be smarter, touch the guitars less, and sequentially line them up? We figured that out in 1 week. We then said, why is it others see our quality differently than we do? Like literally people would say, oh, the quality's not what it used to be at Gibson because look at this, look at this. Someone said, well, JC, I don't know if you know this, but these lights haven't been upgraded for 30 years. Lights. And so what's happening is there's these amazing partners like Sweetwater. I don't know if you know Sweetwater. They're an online retailer of music instruments knocking on $1 billion. They do a 50 point checklist. When they get the guitar, they put it under this amazing light. They have this like doctor of guitar, and if it doesn't pass their test, they send it back to Gibson. Their competitive advantage, their unique selling proposition is we send more Gibson guitars back to Gibson than anyone else. So I meet Chuck at Sweetwater. I go, Chuck, how does your competitive advantage become my disadvantage? So we worked with them. We did the same lighting dynamics. We installed new lighting. I mean, this is like pretty, it sounds basic, but we did it. Now we have brand new lighting. It's all consistent. It's the most powerful but best balanced lighting to understand quality. Then we had one more thing. Someone said, well, I said, what else about quality? He said, JC, look at this. Feel this. Close your eyes. I'm like, closing my eyes. I'm feeling the guitar. I'm like, is there some ritual you got to do here at Gibson? You could feel the particles on the guitar, which were dust. And when you're finishing a guitar and there's dust on it, you can't undust it. And I said, how does that happen? Physics. Cool guy with his southern accent in Nashville says, you ever heard of negative pressure, JC? I said, I've heard of all kinds of different pressure. Remind me what negative is. Well, basically when you got a room here and a room here, and this room sucks that room in, the air. That room makes the wooden guitars, this finishes them, and we're sucking dust in here. We got to get positive pressure again. I'm like, how do we do that? Boom, boom, boom. 3 weeks later, we installed positive pressure, new walls. All of a sudden, within less than 2 months, we've got sequential lined up, new lights, and we've actually got positive pressure. And our quality is improved. In first pass yield, which is at the end of the day, we were rejecting 50% of our guitars. By the end, we're now only rejecting less than 3%. I just want to give you, like, dude, this can really happen. And I'm not looking to say, oh, that's great, and you guys are out of the woods. We're not out of the woods. But it shows actions against that share of sound matter. This notion of cultural and commercial. Last year, arguably, was the most awesome year for music on the big screen. Think of that. If you're in an industry, you go, God, I wish there was a movie about us. I wish there was a cool guy playing Gibson and an awesome girl singing, Get Me Out of the Shallow. Tell me something, girl. You get a guitar right now. But think, like, that's a Gibson guitar. That song was written, produced, put on a screen. Think about it. Bohemian Rhapsody, Gibson guitars in there. Wow, how do you take advantage of that cultural dynamic? I guarantee you, guitar sales were going up at Christmas. Someone said, well, you should start playing a guitar. You should look like him. And then commercially connecting it. Understanding that being commercial is not wrong, it's growth, and it drives what you do, and it drives our ability to invest in the future. And whether it's the future of investing in quality or our factories, or more marketing, or more messaging. Today, those of you that have kids, even with my own kids, if I said, here's your choice. All right, kids, here's today's choice. Not really today, the Christmas choice, let's call it. You get the new iPhone, you get to go to the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch, or you get a new Gibson guitar, or a guitar. iPhone 1, take me to an experience that's cool, and I might, I'll think about the guitar. Wow, how do we start to change that over the long term? And one of the ways that I'm thinking about this is today we consume so much content. Our kids, I have 3 teenagers, they're consuming content. At what point does the consumer of content want to be the creator of content? And we're hearing that more and more often today. The consumer of content wants to be the creator, and the live experience matters more than the whatever the opposite of the live is today, the screen experience. Music is a conduit to that, a lifelong learning. How can we start to get that balance of cultural creation that will actually, by definition, turn into commercial success for our industry? It's a massive challenge, but as a leader, we need to think like that. And I can tell you at Levi's, that's how Levi's thought. They didn't just have an opportunity to go authentic and vintage and cool and Coachella. They had an obligation to bring back something that was special and iconic and lead through all of the challenges. Being patient and aggressive. Everyone says that at Woodstock only 500,000 people were, but you had to be patient to get there, but when you got there, it got a little aggressive with the music. I just like that picture. I don't really know what all that means, but I do think a lot of entrepreneurs and young people say, JC, what are some ideas? What do you have to say? Well, be patiently aggressive. And it confuses some people, but sometimes, have you ever, I've not met most of you, but I guarantee you we have something in common. Ready? Be honest. Who here has made a fast decision they regretted? Too aggressive. Who here has been so patient, it'll all work out, it'll be okay, I'll coach them, I'll train them, the market will come back to us, we'll be okay. Who here has been too patient? We're all together here, by the way. But being patiently aggressive, when you have the insight and the information, you know intuitively, but also your analytics tell you, and your team expects it, be aggressive. And when you don't have that insight and you don't have that intuition, don't be pushed into it. Take the professional patience to pace yourself. And it gets me into trouble sometimes because people say, JC, you were a little slow on that mark. I'm not known as a slow guy, but I'm trying to be known as being professionally patient. And I'll tell you, if we can all learn that in lives personally and professionally, there's a tip we might just take out of this whole thing. Be patiently aggressive. Iconic and innovative. This is my favorite. It's exactly what's needed at Gibson. It's what got Levi's back on track, leveraging its iconic roots, leaning into innovative future. I've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I've got an interesting 2-minute clip. If we're allowed to go a few minutes over time, we cool with that? So when you think about innovation, has anyone seen Ed Sheeran? You know who he is, right? Did you see that amazing thing he did? I think it was at the Grammys last year where he had one guitar, he had a pedal, and he looped. You know what looping is? So basically you play, you then play on top of yourself, and you got the whole Grammys rocking, right? And my kids are like, oh my God, that Ed, he's awesome. And he's cool, he's good. And they're thinking this is the most modern, innovative thing they've ever seen in music, right? And I'm going, okay. So does anyone know what the name of the famous Gibson guitar is? It's called a Les Paul. Absolutely. And Les Paul was an innovator. He developed multi-track recording. He was an amazing guitarist. He and his wife, Mary, were amazing throughout the 50s and the golden era of music. They transitioned and transformed the way people could experience music in that day. And he was an innovator. And I was trying to go back saying, well, how do you be iconic, not just through the guitars, but through what people were doing with them? And I came across this clip that I thought was so indicative of being iconic and innovative, but not in today's world as we would know it, but this was back 30, 40, 50 years ago. So if you've never seen Les Paul, never seen him play, or have never understood what innovation could be, check this out. Turn this up a little bit.
I know what you're wondering, and I'd like to start the thing off right. I'd like to explain to you what I have on my guitar that invented many years ago, and I'm very proud of it. It's this little black box that I have on my guitar here. It's called the Les Pulverizer. And you can't buy it at Radio Shack or Sears or anything like that. This is my own invention. But with it, I can take my one guitar and I can multiply it into an orchestra. Van Halen is worried sick over my little black box. I'd like to start first by showing you how it works. I'll start with one guitar live like this. Okay, now throw that switch and you'll hear it back. Part to that, you'll hear two guitars. That's three guitars out of work. Now watch this one. It's four, now I'll go for five. Here goes a drummer. They're worried sick over my little black box. I could keep it up all night. Now I'm going to ask ask the band to join me and listen to this.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And the final one, and this is one, it's more about culture and more about setting the conditions for success with the team and quite frankly for yourself and for myself. And it's this notion of being able to pivot. Not just change 180 degrees, but pivot. Sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes it's a lot. And I love this notion of trying to reinvent yourself. It's time to reinvent yourself. And pivoting to actually drive performance. We talk about a performance culture and all of these things, but sometimes, have you ever had someone say, well, just perform better, and there's nothing to do and no way to do it, and they're not giving you either the vision or the tools or the actions or the team or the resources. But if we say we're going to pivot to a new vision, we're going to pivot to a new level of expectation, we're going to invest specifically in what matters most, the quality of our guitars, the quality of our people, all of a sudden, I, by definition, as a leader, have had to pivot, and I expect that of my team. And it was worrying at one stage early on when I got to Gibson, and someone said, "Oh, thank God, we're just going to go back to business as usual." I was like, "I think we got to have a meeting, like now." And and it wasn't necessarily the individual's fault because they had a culture of just like doing what they've always done. And I said, no, it's not. It's going to be this notion of business as unusual, but in a different way. And by setting that vision and by proving we could pivot, not just me as a leader, but also the team and our dealers and our guitarists, they expected us to pivot and to perform, our guitars to perform better, our business to perform better. We have new owners, private equity owners that have an expectation that over time, there's significant investment in taking it through an obstacle course of bankruptcy, setting the conditions for success with new leadership, taking an iconic brand. There's an expectation you're going to do something significant with that. That's called a pivot. So I would remind myself and all of us that sometimes reinventing yourself is the most challenging thing you can do. And I've got a friend in the room with Elizabeth Wood, who's currently she's the chief HR officer of Levi's, and she's seen several pivots at Levi's, but they all are worth it if done properly over time against a vision that's compelling and achievable. You can ask her about me later. I was one of her, I was one of her pivot challenges. Right, Elizabeth? In a good way. So there it is. The past matters at Gibson. The present, we're setting conditions for success as leaders. None of us can guarantee success in the future, but we should be able to guarantee we can set better conditions for success. And if you do that, the notion of achieving that vision in the future can become a reality. Whether it's the share of the mountain versus the share of ski, whether it's the candy bar versus the share of a snack food market, whether it's a toe-protected sandal or a hybrid uber awesome shoe, share of jeans, share of closet, or share of guitar versus share of sound. Vision matters. So go back to those moments that get created. Momentum doesn't get created with one powerful thing. It happens over time. Each moment can either be a moment that comes and goes and didn't matter, or it's a moment that starts to create synergy for your brand, your business, or even your personal life, that all of those moments come together to create momentum. It's a powerful force. The only thing harder than creating momentum is keeping it. And just as we start to get Gibson back on track, it's my intention, it's my hope, it's our strategy, it's our expectation. Once you get that momentum, you're expected to keep it, and that's really, really hard. And that requires sometimes an evolution of the vision, a pivoting of the strategy to stay relevant for the future. That's the challenge going forward. And if we're successful, we'll continue to own, deliver, shape sound for the next 125 years. Thank you.